Ebola is a terrible disease. It's known as a hemorrhagic fever virus because the illness that it causes is like an extreme fever. The symptoms of infection begin with a sore throat, headaches, nausea, and muscle pain, and this escalates until the patient is vomiting and suffering from diarrhea as their body tries to purge itself, and all of this strain causes harm to the liver and the kidneys. Inflammation and damage to tissues can cause internal bleeding, and this is where the virus gets its hemorrhagic nomenclature. The patient literally hemorrhages internally, and if nothing is done, or if treatment isn't started soon enough, the patient will die from fluid loss and subsequent low blood pressure. The Ebola virus essentially makes the patient squeeze out massive amounts of fluid in the form of sweat, blood, vomit, and diarrhea. And all of these body fluids carry traces of the virus, making the disease extremely contagious. On top of this, Ebola is extremely dangerous, with a fatality rate higher than 25% in some of the best case scenarios. In the worst case scenarios, where, for example, a rural village might be infected and not receive medical aid for weeks, the fatality rate can reach up to 90%. This happened in 2003, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a village of 143 people was infected, and they didn't receive adequate medical care in time, and this led to the death of 128 of those 143 people. In more recent years, West Africa saw the world's largest Ebola outbreak in 2014, with more than 11,000 deaths out of approximately 28,000 cases of infection. That's an almost 40% mortality rate, and it saw the spread of the disease to places outside of Africa, like Europe and the Americas. There's an ongoing Ebola outbreak in the Congo right now, which has infected close to 3,300 people since August of 2018, and it's claimed the lives of almost 2,200 people so far. This outbreak is still ongoing, so the caseload and the mortality numbers are almost certainly going to keep rising. But amid this horror, there is some good news. In 2014, the Public Health Agency of Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory, the New Link Genetics Corporation, and the pharmaceutical giant Merck have all worked to produce a human-safe Ebola vaccine called Ervebo, which was used in the 2014 West African outbreak of Zaire Ebola virus. This is one of just several strains of Ebola virus that are floating around, and it's the one that's been causing the most damage and the most death in the modern era. Now, the news that I bring you today is that now this vaccine has been approved by European regulators and is being fast-tracked by the World Health Organization so that it can be put on the market and distributed to the Congo for use against the current outbreak. It's also expected that the US FDA will approve the vaccine in March of next year, which will allow the vaccine to spread across the markets of the Western Hemisphere. This fast-tracking, this pre-qualification, means that the vaccine meets the WHO standards for safety, quality, and effectiveness, so it can be launched out of the lab and put to use in the real world as quickly as is logistically and economically possible. European Commissioner Vytenis Andriukaitis said, quote, "Finding a vaccine as soon as possible against this terrible virus has been a priority for the international community ever since Ebola hit West Africa 5 years ago. Today's decision is therefore a major step forward in saving lives in Africa and beyond." Unquote. In an announcement, World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said, quote, "Pre-qualification is a historic step towards ensuring the people who most need it are able to access this life-saving vaccine. 5 years ago, we had no vaccine and no therapeutics for Ebola. With a pre-qualified vaccine and experimental therapeutics, Ebola is now preventable and treatable." Unquote. This is fantastic news, and it looks like things are only going to get better. As this vaccine is being refined and improved, there was another news story that broke recently about an experimental series of vaccines that can prevent infection from 4 different strains of hemorrhagic viruses, including 2 strains of Ebola. With all of these advances being made, And with more vaccines and treatments being added to our medical arsenal, hopefully Ebola can become a controllable threat, a subdued threat, and maybe, someday in a brighter future, it can be eliminated just like smallpox. This dreamlike vision of the future would be a gift to not just those people living in Africa, but to all mankind.